Joining me now is Michael Gatlin. Thanks so much for being here, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start off by asking the first question that everyone always wants to know, and that is, why are you running?
You know, I've been asked that question a lot over the last couple of weeks. Some people are saying, do you know what you're getting into? You know, I have been involved in Framingham town government for about 35 years because I really enjoy what's involved. I like working with people. I like to help make Framingham what I think it can be and what I think the people in town want it to be. I've lived here my whole life. I've got a real stake in the community. I remember when downtown was a happening place to be. I wanted to see that come back. I just think Framingham has so much potential, so many good people, so many good things. I want to take the experiences that I've had over the last 30 or so years and take it to the next level and be an advocate for Framingham.
Great. So what do you think are some of Framingham's most pressing issues that you can impact if you are elected?
A couple come to mind. One is we've got a couple hazardous waste sites in Framingham that need to be taken care of. I know that the legislative delegation has worked hard to kind of keep on DEP's back, to keep that rolling along. I think that sometimes the state loses focus or doesn't see it as much of a priority. I know that Chris worked very hard to try and keep DEP on that issue. I would continue that. I think that that's an important thing. And over the last couple of years, and increasingly during that period, people are talking about traffic. Now, traffic, it's based on a number of things. Some of them are good. Some of them are the fact that Framingham is doing well economically, and that creates some kind of traffic. But I think at bottom, a lot of the traffic issues in Framingham are structural in nature. The roadways are old. Capacity is not what you'd like to see. Traffic signals are not what you'd always like to see. And I think the state can play a role in that. Infrastructure repairs. We've got a couple of, we have several major routes running through Framingham, state roads. Maintenance of that, widening of those roads, and working on traffic flow can be state issues. As a legislator, I would work to make certain the Department of Transportation and the state generally spends money here to help us with our infrastructure to solve our local traffic problems.
So since you mentioned that, I'm going to take another question that I was going to ask you later out of order right now and just talk for a minute about Route 9, because the state hasn't really stepped up to deal with some of the dangerous issues on Route 9. We've had some fatalities. We've really tried to draw attention to the needs that we have for Route 9. What would you do specifically about that?
Well, I think we need to, I'm always a little reluctant or skeptical to talk about studies, but I know that there are a number of studies going on, the Golden Triangle studies, some studies dealing with Route 9 and Shoppersville. We need to take a look at what we want Route 9 to be. The retail stuff that we've seen in the Golden Triangle is changing. I think that we need to work with the state and with local officials like Natick and create a situation where we decide what we want Route 9 to be and make traffic and safety improvements that reflect those changes. Some of those things may not happen right away. We're not going to turn all of those things into the new retail outlets of the 21st century overnight. But good planning and good road construction that goes with that is something that we need to take a look at now, and I think that there are state funds for doing some of that stuff. I know one that makes me crazy particularly is right down here on Route 9 by the fire station. We need to find some way of getting people to use the crosswalk farther down Route 9, or there's been talk.
Framingham State.
For Framingham State. I mean, there's been talk, and I don't know how viable it is, but there's been talk about even creating some kind of an under path or something under so that people can get from one side of Route 9 to the other without getting hit by cars. You can put all of the traffic systems in place that you can think of. What it comes down to is getting people to use them. So there's an educational part of that. I think that, I think the university is doing what it can. Maybe they need to make that more of a focus, but I think there are things that we can do to make that area safer as well.
Okay. What do you think you uniquely bring to the table as a candidate in this race?
as I said, I've been doing this. I have literally been doing this since I was 16 and a half years old, as perverse as that may sound.
You sure it was 16 and a half?
It was 16 and a half. I was working in a special election. The then state representative, Bob Owens, resigned his seat to become Congressman Drynan's legislative aide. I was 16 and a half years old, and I was really into politics. And I talked to one of my teachers at school and said, well, there's going to be a special election to fill Bob Owens' seat. Why don't you get involved? So I was working in an election in which I was ineligible to vote. I have loved the service aspect, working with the town and the town's people to make things better since that time. And I've got over 35 years of experience. I have been a PTO president. I've been an associate member of the planning board. I've been the chair of one superintendent search committee and a member of another. I was a chair of an elementary school principal search committee. I chaired the Economic Development Industrial Corporation here in town, which advocates for business and tries to get relationships between the city and business. I am on the board of the Framingham State Foundation, Framingham State University Foundation. So I have a breadth of experience that I think is unique in this race. I think that part of this job is knowing who you talk to and who those people talk to, knowing where the pressure points are, knowing where the work needs to be done, having relationships. All of that is something that comes with experience. You can't get that from reading the newspaper. You need to be living that over a period of time to understand how the city really functions. I think that's where I am the strong candidate.
Okay.
I have that experience.
Okay. Now, what do you think, considering some of the things that you just said about your experience, what do you think is the greatest challenge we face for economic development in Framingham, and what will you commit to doing to help the city from the State House?
I think, again, it comes down to infrastructure, I think,
Okay.
is a big part of it. We've seen an improvement downtown as a result of state money to change the traffic pattern downtown. It's still not perfect. They need to work on the sequencing of the train signals. But I think that similar kind of work needs to be done in other neighborhoods throughout Framingham. And again, we talk about Saxonville. There's a state road there. Mm-hmm. We can access, or we need to try to access state funds for that area mm-hmm. to help improve traffic flow. I think also that infrastructure maybe isn't entirely the proper word, but I think that to the extent that traffic is a function of what's going on in town, we need to work with EDCAR and MWRTA to help improve public transportation in Framingham. We need to take a look at alternative forms of transportation. We should be doing a lot more biking, mm-hmm. which means some changes in roadways to keep all the people who want to bike safe. Mm-hmm. That's environmentally stronger. It improves the quality of life for people, and I think that there should be state funds that we can access to help make Framingham stronger in that area.
Okay, let's switch over to the schools for a minute and talk about education. What do you think is the biggest challenge we face in the Framingham schools, and what impact do you think you can have on that?
Well, I think we've got 3 schools that need improvement, and I think that is and should be the first priority. There's a lot that goes into that category. When you are comparing Framingham schools with other communities, we have a very diverse population. It is relatively easy to run a school system when everyone is of the same race and the same economic background and the same educational background. We don't have that in Framingham. I take that diversity to be a strength, but with the strength comes challenges. We have kids in school who are coming from families that don't speak English as their primary language. They have economic disadvantages. I've been talking as I go around the town for this race, and one of my first priorities is to get the state to fund pre-K education. I think that every study done will say to you that kids who have had pre-K education perform markedly better throughout their entire school career than those who do not.
Mm-hmm. Again, another funding issue is what you're saying.
Again, it is a funding issue. But I think, and I'll get back to that in a second, because that is not insignificant. And what we have right now in Framingham is kids coming into the system at kindergarten, and their classmates have had pre-K education. They have not. That puts them at a disadvantage that they never really catch up on. It carries through their entire educational experience. We need to, I think we can, with state funding to make this a priority, we can close that gap by making pre-K education available. We also need to take a real look at the foundation budget. The outlines of that budget go back to 1993. That was light years ago. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of decisions made about how the budget was put together in terms of the cost of special education. They weren't even paying any attention to healthcare costs. Those things are chewing up the budget. True. We need to have, there's a study going on at the state level at this time to take a look at the foundation budget. We need to get the foundation budget up to 100% of the obligation, but we need to take a look at what that consists of as well and see whether the foundation budget really reflects the cost of education. Mm-hmm. Those things, if fixed, can make a difference here in Framingham.
Yeah, those are big projects to take on, for sure. Take a lot of time.
But they're worth it. We're talking about our kids.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Which of Chris Walsh's bills will you continue to work on?
You know, Chris was a really great guy. My daughter, in fact, ran one of his campaigns. He had a lot of quality of life issues that I think we need to continue with. His support of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and things like that, I think, are very important. They're environmentally sound. They create a real lifestyle advantage for us in Framingham, and we need to continue that work that he did, the lifestyle.
Okay. Do you have an interest in pursuing legislation to change the Dover Amendment, which you know has a big impact on Framingham?
Yeah, we need to take a look at that. I don't want to say that we need to eradicate it at the roots. I understand and I applaud a lot of what the Dover Amendment is supposed to do. These programs are crucial to people's lives. We sometimes have situations where people they're nervous, they're uncomfortable, they think it's going to affect property values, and they're anxious about having these programs come in. Under the old system, they would have prevented these programs from coming in. We need to take a look at whether there's a way we can strike a balance a little bit better.
Okay. What about sanctuary cities and gateway city designations? Do you think that Framingham should be either?
You know, what's happening down on our southern border right now with kids is just an appalling thing. I would not be opposed to Framingham being a sanctuary city.
Okay. Do you have an opinion on the number of social service facilities located in Framingham?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do I have an opinion?
Well, I guess that we hear a lot about people who say that Framingham has a lot of social services, then that has an impact on the community.
Sure.
What's your take on that?
I think social services as a general rule are a good thing. I don't think that that's a negative that we have social services. I do think that siting sometimes is a problem. Mm-hmm. If they are concentrated very heavily in one area, that is a problem. We need to take a look at working with the people who provide these extremely worthwhile services and say, can we spread these out? Is there something we can do so that this is not concentrated in one area of the town? I think that's a fair discussion to have with social service providers.
I'm going to give you the State House magic wand and say, you know, what if you were at the State House right now and you had the magic wand and there was one thing that you could change with that magic wand in Framingham from the State House? What would it be?
Well, I think that in this election, one issue is going to be that whoever becomes the rep is going to be at the absolute bottom of the totem pole because of the seniority system. And I understand that's how legislatures work. There has to be a way that power can be shared more easily, that a freshman rep has more of an impact right from the get-go.
Interesting.
I think that you lose a lot of ideas and you lose a lot of bright people who get frustrated with the system and say, you know, I'm not going to be able to do anything until I've been here 6 years. That's unfortunate because these people have a talent. The people who elected them think they have a talent, and they just don't stick around because they feel they're beating their head against the wall. So I think that's something that I'd like to see. Is there some way we can soften up the seniority system so that freshman reps aren't irrelevant? Having said that, I don't think that you need to be irrelevant in the performance of your job. How much you can get through the legislature at any point in time is going to be limited. I think all of us would like to think we can go in there and file the next Civil Rights Act of 1964 and change the world. That doesn't happen even for the best legislators.
But what about if that wand was for Framingham? That's what I was
Well,
leaning towards.
I think, I understand that, and that's right. I think the seniority thing is,
Okay.
because I think that...
Oh, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
the connection for getting things done that are relative to Framingham.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
But having said that, I also think that having the position as a legislator involves more than just filing bills, getting bills passed. I think that Chris Walsh was a prime example of a guy who could bring diverse groups together because of his status as a legislator, and the town benefited from that position.
Okay. What, now just getting into the politics, what political campaigns have you worked on in the past? Who's working on your campaign? What does your team look like? People like to know
Sure.
who you are, you know, what you've stood for before and who's standing with you now.
Yep. I've worked, my real active political campaign days were when I was younger and didn't have a family.
16 and a half.
Yeah, well, as crazy as it sounds, it's true. I did a lot of work for Michael Dukakis. I did some work for Barney Frank. When I was, interestingly enough, when I was in college.
How about in Framingham, though?
In Framingham, well, I mean, there was those campaigns here in Framingham.
Oh, okay.
You know, I've worked for, there's been a lot of people that I've worked for locally. Joel Winnett for moderator, for one that I can think of. There's been a number of candidates that I've worked with and for over the years. Less so more recently, as I say more when I was younger. In terms of who's running my campaign, I'm proud to say that my daughter Vanessa is my campaign manager. Vanessa most recently worked in Ed Markey's office. As a staffer for 2 years. She worked for Martha Coakley. She worked for Elizabeth Warren. She's been all over. It used to be that I was the celebrity when we did political things. Now we go to events and people say, "Hey, Vanessa, I want to talk to you." Who's that guy who's with you?
And who's your treasurer? You have a treasurer?
Jim Stockless, who
Okay.
was, that's another campaign I did some work with. Jim Stockless, the school committee. So Jim is my campaign treasurer.
Okay. Well, thank you so much and wishing you the very best.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Okay, my pleasure. For more information, go to the Facebook page at Mike Gatlin for Framingham. And from there, when the website is ready, you'll see the link. The three candidates you heard from today are running against each other in a September 4th primary election. No names will appear on that ballot. Voters will have to write in the name of the person they choose, and the candidate who gets the most votes on September 4th will be listed on the ballot as the Democratic candidate in the November election. I encourage you to go to the candidates' websites and social media pages to read the information that they provide about themselves and watch this show again on accessframingham.tv at your convenience. Most importantly, make sure you vote on September 4th and again in November. And thank you for tuning into the Audrey Hall Show, where you will always learn something new.